For the first time ever on Engine Masters, we're gonna be testing inline 6-cylinder power. But can we use boost to make muscle car levels of horsepower? Well, that's what we're gonna find out. You asked for it, you got it. We are testing an inline 6. Now, everything we've done on Engine Masters so far has been V configuration engines, and this time it is an inliner, meaning the pistons are all lined up right in a row. Now, you might not really be familiar with this if you're like a later model performance enthusiast with LS engines and Coyotes and such, but if you're a Cummins guy or a Toyota 2J guy, those are also inline 6s. But you may not know that this configuration dates back to the dawn of time. And in the 40s through the early 80s, they were really the baseline engine for every standard mundane grocery getter. And of course, Chrysler had to jump into the fray. The Slant 6 engine, like this Mopar right here, was originally developed in 1958 and 59 for the big release of the Plymouth Valiant in 1960. And they made a big push with that. As a matter of fact, Hot Rod Magazine covered it a lot. And the engine itself was known back then by Mopar as the Valiant engine before people called it a Slant 6. Why is it called a Slant 6? Well, most inline engines have the pistons stood straight up like this, so the engine is rather tall. Now, for the design criteria of the Plymouth Valiant, they leaned this engine over 30 degrees, so it is a slant. As they call it, the leaning tower of power. Power? Well, kind of a misnomer, I think, but really performance was part of the package from the very beginning. As a matter of fact, they had a NASCAR Junior Racing League with these back at the very beginning, and it got dumped after a year because it was just so boring. Because honestly, the Valiants just kept winning, and that's part of what added to their lore. They made this engine from that 1960 Valiant all the way into 1987 in trucks. Now, Chrysler made these things in displacement of 170 cubic inches, which is a lower deck height, and then the high deck height family was 198 cubic inches, or the most popular of them, which was 225. Now, if you're a Mopar guy, you know the Slant 6 and you defend it to the death as being the most reliable, awesome inline 6 ever. They say when there's a nuclear holocaust, like it's gonna happen in 2020, the only thing that's gonna be left is roaches and Slant 6s. The thing I will say though, is I believe the Slant 6 is vastly overrated. Yep. I said it out loud. However, I admit that Dulcich has put together a beautiful example. This thing looks rad. The thing is, he did it to try and exceed the horsepower of a 1968 or 1969 383 V8 Plymouth Roadrunner. Can he do it? Well, I present Mr. Steve Dulcich to tell you exactly what his plan is.
My Slant 6. Now, this engine came out of my 1968 Dodge Dart hardtop, and it served me really well for a whole number of years. I don't know how long, but the only thing is it was pretty worn out, it was very greasy, and maybe even slightly underpowered. Now, the engine was a remanufactured unit. It's not original to the car. In fact, the block is from 1984. And as an 84 block, it came with a cast crankshaft where all the earlier engines had superior forged crankshaft. But I was doing a basic rebuild on the short block. I used stock replacement style sealed power pistons, and I used factory rods along with the factory crankshaft. The only really trick thing in the block is the camshaft. It's a Howard's cam with 220 duration on the intake and the exhaust and 473 lift. Now, originally these engines were 145 horsepower in the Dart application, and the compression ratio was really low. And I bumped that up to about 10.5 to 1 from a factory 8.4 to 1 by decking the block and milling the heads. Now, the heads is where it really starts getting interesting because they are fully competition ported. They have oversized valves from SI. One 700 intake, 144 exhaust. That's 80 thousandths bigger than stock, and that really helps the flow. On the other side of the head here, we've got a Clifford split header, and we have an Offenhauser 4-barrel manifold. A Holley Ultra XP carburetor is run when we have this thing naturally aspirated, but When we have this magnificent Torque Storm supercharger, we have a designated blow-through carburetor. This one is a quick fuel 750 BAN model. It's made for a blow-through application. So we're gonna run this naturally aspirated, then we're gonna see what it does with boost. Well, what are you gonna say about the Slant 6, Freiberger?
I was just mentally trying to think how many I've put into a dumpster.
I remember seeing you do it several times.
The whole key is to get it balanced right on the corner of the dumpster and disconnect your chain from the cherry picker.
I remember the sound distinctly, but and you know what? Those Slant 6s were probably better than this one because this is a late model Slant with a cast crank.
It doesn't matter. You don't need the forging.
Oh, no?
It's 75% of an engine, so I've reduced my expectations by 25%. But I must say, Dulcich, you did a fantastic job detailing this thing. It looks awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I only really set out to do a $500 overhaul, and I wanted it to look nice. So that was my thing. It was just a fun project for a driver, not a race engine.
You're the only guy I know that can make a Slant 6 look cool.
Oh, thank you, Steve-O. I consider that a compliment. I actually do think it looks cool.
Those are the ones we laughed at in high school.
Oh, I know.
That's when you knew he was driving his sister's car.
To be honest, I remember going to the junkyard and opening a hood on a car, and if I saw a Slant 6, it actually disgusted me. You know,
Well, I'm
back
glad
in the
he
day.
admits it. But when they run sweet, there's something nice about an inliner. It's just kind of cute, cool, quiet, you know,
Smooth.
drives around. But then when you try and hop them up, I've never been impressed even once. Remember the Matt King CUDA?
Yeah.
Yeah, fail.
I remember it was 16 seconds, and it had a cam that barely drove on the street.
Exactly.
So
far we've established this engine is really worth nothing but comedy.
Well, it was fun for me. It's just a novelty. I just wanted that to go back in, and it's going back in better than I expected to do at first. Okay, well, let's fire this bad boy up and make some buzzing sounds.
All thundering 6 cylinders.
Blundering.
Yeah, blundering. It's cool, though. Okay.
All right, guys.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah,
Really?
that's a 200. It's a little engine.
Our power for our first pull with the Slant 6, 251 pound-feet of torque at 4,200 RPM and up at a big 4,900 RPM, made 215 horsepower, which, Steve, you will note, is not even 1 per cubic inch.
No, but I did some research on Slant 6 builds on the internet, and the best was a former co-worker of yours, Steve Magnante, in Hot Rod Magazine. He built a Slant 6 with some very, very big name guys, and the peak horsepower was 220, 222, something like that. And
Oh, so it was better than this.
yeah, by a little bit, but it
Yeah.
had a much more racy intake manifold, and it had 20 degrees more camshaft. This is a very mild street cam, so I don't feel bad about that, given what you can expect from a Slant 6. I've seen a lot of Slant 6 builds under 200 horsepower.
If this was a V8 with the same camshaft and stock cylinder heads, it'd probably be doing a little better than 1 per cubic inch, yeah?
I'm sure I remember what camshaft is in it or how much duration there was.
This
Do you
is
recall?
220 at 50.
Okay.
Yeah, so you-
Solid flat, so.
Throw that in a small block Chevy with stock heads, or with
Maybe
a
it's
350.
300
Yeah,
kind
you're
of
right.
about the same.
It's
It's not
kind
too
of a
bad.
wobbler.
Yeah.
It tells me, though, that you really have to love the Slant 6 in order to hop it up, because you've got just as much money in this as you would in a 318, and it's making 100 less horsepower. Well, not 100.
Oh,
let's
easily 100.
say.
You can get 375
Yeah,
out of a very mild 318 or 400 even
Yeah.
with stock-based parts. But this build wasn't about the horsepower. It was just a fun kind of project
Just
for
what
me.
I said. You got to love the Slant 6
Yeah.
in order to pour this kind of money into it, because it's not a powerhouse.
Anymore, there's something to be said about being unique.
Yeah.
Because everybody's done everything 100 times, but they haven't done this 100 times.
Yeah.
That's my first one, to be honest with you. I've never built a Slant 6 before this one.
And now you already want another one.
I do. I want to try going with a little more aggressive combination.
Okay, so I think performed as expected. So we got to go to the next step, is find out if we can turn it into that other 25% of an engine with boost.
Okay. Steve,
That always fixes it.
Don't blow up my Slant 6.
Oh, I'm not going to be blowing it up. You have to put the blower on first.
Then you'll take care of it.
I will take care of it and be very cautious in caring.
Okay, thank you.
So 215 horsepower. Now we're gonna go see if we can step that up with supercharger boost. Torque storm, here we come. Let's go.
For the torque storm supercharger. We'll see a little torque step there.
The carburetor we're putting on here is a special one for blow-through applications. It's from QFT. It's a 750 CFM double pumper with annular boosters.
You think that's enough blow-through carburetor?
Way too much.
It's way overkill for this.
It is. They make the 600 or 650 ones too.
So what we have here is a centrifugal supercharger. This is built by a company called Torque Storm, and they provide you with the whole kit for a Slant 6. The mounting bracket for the supercharger itself, the pulleys that go on the engine, the tensioner, the blow-off valve, the whole 9 yards. The whole idea here is to add pressurized air into the engine, thus giving more horsepower. Now, we can vary the amount of pressurized air by varying the pulley size here. Right now, it's got the slowest pulley combination that I have for this blower. So that's gonna be the mildest setup, and we're gonna go into the dyno cell and see what it does right now.
And as simple as that, we are supercharged. Now, I know that you gapped the rings for boost, but it's still cast pistons, so I'm guessing that Steve wanted to pour some gnarlier fuel in the thing.
What we had Troy put in was 116 maximal. It's just a safety thing. I've never really seen a big difference in using less octane than more, you know, from a power standpoint. So for me, it's just be as safe as you can.
You always go right to the bottom of the page on the octane, I know.
Well, it's just a safer way to run the things. I mean, with a cast piston, it scares me a little bit, even though there's not a ton of boost, but it still does. But it's just a safe way to run.
So it's a Sunoco 116.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm safe with that.
So we got that Sunoco 116 in it, but I think we are also retarding the timing, right?
So it actually surprisingly only wanted 30 degrees total timing, normally aspirated. We did some timing sweeps, which tells me the combustion chamber is not horrible.
It's a really long stroke and a really small bore.
So that'll certainly affect it.
Yeah.
It's not a ton of boost, you know, it's not, well, we don't think it's gonna be a ton of boost, but I'm thinking we pull it back 4 or 5 degrees. On any forced induction engine, the combustion is faster because it's a higher pressure. And so we don't have to start it as early. And so I'm thinking 25-ish would be probably appropriate for this thing, and we'll be safe there with the 116.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Everything is better with boost.
Let's find out how much better.
Okay.
So we have the Torque Storm installed, we've got the Sunoco 116 gas in the tank, and Steve just pulled back the timing a little bit. We're ready to make our first run with boost. Thing's like a buzzsaw.
I know.
Yeah, but it didn't quite make it, I don't think.
Well, not quite.
Of course, we're not fully all in yet.
No.
Yeah, we need to look at the boost and the air fuel and all that stuff. Well, of course, boost pushed up the horsepower and also the RPM at the power peaks. We're now making 315.7 pound-feet of torque at 4,500 RPM, and up at 5,400 RPM, we're looking at 308.5. It's just short of Dulcich's goal. He's trying to make more power than the 69 Roadrunner 3D3, which would be 335 horsepower.
Well, you know the beautiful thing about blowers, they make more than one pulley.
Right.
I know.
Well, before we go there, let's have a look at what we got here. That's worth it.
I would say.
So for that power gain, this kit is $2,800, which seems like a lot, but that's a massive difference.
Yeah, you just turned the turd 6-cylinder into something that's really fun.
Yeah. Now we're looking at the boost that it took to make a little bit more than 300 horsepower out of our Slant 6 and 7.5 at peak at 5,500 RPM.
That's not even trying on good gas.
Yeah, no, that's nothing. So I think the obvious answer is
More boost?
right.
It's always the answer.
Okay. I think I can do that, Freiberger.
Well, we haven't hit Steve's goal yet, and so next we're gonna go put a smaller blower pulley on it for more boost. As a tech tip, I believe you always want to anti-seize the pulley to the shaft on these centrifugal blowers, otherwise they wobble a little and like weld themselves together. We just did a pulley change for more boost. In our initial step when we were running 7.5 pounds of boost, we had it pulleyed with an 8 on the crank and a 4-incher on the blower, so that's 100% overdriven. And the internal step-up ratio in the TorqueStorm supercharger is 4.45 to 1. So we did the math, and that put the blower RPM at 44,500 RPM. Now that we've got a 3.5-inch pulley on the supercharger, we're doing 128% overdriven. And so now we're spinning the blower closer to 50,000 RPM, which, as a guess, Brule and I think that puts the boost pressure map more in where it wants to be with greater efficiency for the impeller in this thing. We're not really sure. TorqueStorm only makes this one model of blower, so it's sort of universal for any engine, but 5,000 RPM is gonna be a little bit lower than you would normally run it. I think on a V8 you would see that thing turning, you know, at least 6, maybe 65, which means even more blower speed. But you know what? That's why you have different pulleys, optimizing it for different engines. But now I think we're ready to go. He's gonna slam the belt on it and we're gonna run it.
Yeah, maybe.
Look at that.
That's beautiful. Oh man, look at that. Fits like a store-bought one. Now that we've got the smaller pulley on the blower, it should make more boost and more horsepower. We're gonna fire this thing up and find out. Oh, man.
We're not sure what just happened. We'll wait to see the actual data.
You want the good news or the bad news?
It had killer torque, but I'm braced for disappointment.
I think it made your number, but I think you're going to have an opportunity to buy those Weisco pistons you were talking about.
Oh, really?
earlier.
Oh, really?
I saw lots of smoke out the breather.
Ooh, I didn't notice that. Oh, it's still smoking out the breather.
Oh, what was the good news?
It made the number you wanted.
No, I saw the torque was coming in pretty hard, and the thing is, I couldn't stand it. I literally looked away. I couldn't watch.
So you actually think it hold a piston?
It's internal. I mean, I didn't hear anything horrible like a broken connecting rod or disintegrated piston, but it's got lots of smoke and oil out the breather. I'm thinking piston.
Well, it could have blown a head gasket, too.
It is possible cylinder pressure leaking
That
into
would
the
be
combustion
such a
chamber.
bummer. I was looking at the power number. You were looking away.
I know, I couldn't take it because I couldn't stand it.
Well, let's see what kind of power it made anyway. Well, here's our power numbers with the perhaps wounded Slant 6. 341.3 pound-feet of torque at 4,800 RPM, and it made 328 horsepower at 5,500 RPM. But is it actually wounded? I guess, let's look at the boost. Was it absurd? I didn't notice.
No, it was like 12.
It made 10.5 pounds of boost.
So
That's
it
not
wasn't a big
extreme.
jump,
I don't think it's broken.
as he says with ultimate confidence.
We better go find out for sure. Oh, this is not looking good. It's smoking a lot out of the breather, and we just cranked it over, and it's interesting. You hear it crank, yun, 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 poof, yun, 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 poof. Like there's one piston that's really smoking it.
The likelihood, it would be 1 in 6 that it would be the last one that we checked that's destroyed. They're impossible. The odds are just not there.
I'll go get the compression gauge.
Oh,
it's
this
that
is
one.
oily.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy is oily.
Got a lot of oil
but
on it.
you know what? He's not showing any pieces of piston.
Steve, when we pulled out our spark plugs, we found that one of them has a ton of oil on it, which is bad news. And so we're going to proceed with a compression check to see if that hole is dead or not.
I'm not even going to look. Freiberger. No compression there.
Loser. That's unfortunate. So that means probably a piston. He thinks it killed a head gasket. I don't see how that puts oil all over it.
That was my suspicion.
We determined that the piston in number 5 is junk. Already taking that off. You have chunks?
What is that? It's a blown head gasket, Steve.
What, you see it?
Yeah, right here.
Well, that's the best possible answer. Yeah, so this is the best possible news. It actually blew a head gasket, and the reason it did not show on the other 2 cylinders is because it blew straight out this way, which on the Slant 6 goes right into the crankcase. So, and there's no water there either. So that's an easy fix. Good. It lived to fight another day.
Boom.
The
Bro shake.
Well, our failure point was way better than expected, or better news. This is a Slant 6 head gasket, just like the one Dulcich used, and it blew out right there, which goes right into the crankcase. What's the story?
You know what, Freiberger, I actually agonized over the head gasket when I was putting that together, because the directions on this, and this is a stock replacement head gasket, nothing special. It doesn't have the wire reinforced fire ring, which would help seal compression. And there's only 4 fasteners per cylinder on the Slant 6, and they're puny 7/16 bolts, so not very good clamping. And I was going to use a little bit of secret sauce on it and do a little bit of this and that, and then, you know, it was late at night, and it says use no sealer right on the gasket.
So it swayed you?
I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna slap it on there, and I brought the extra with me just in case, even though we don't have time to swap it or all the right stuff. It wasn't a big shocker, to be honest with you.
Well, you did call it. I mean, we were worried about the piston and everything. He said head gasket right away.
I'm never that lucky. So
Yeah.
That's why I said piston.
Right. So that's really good. I guess that is the good news and the bad news, is that it's broken, but it's not that bad. Of course, the other bad news is it didn't quite make the power you wanted. But then we come back to more good news. 3 more pounds of boost did that. The red lines are when we had 7.5 pounds in it. The black lines are when we had 10.5 pounds at peak. So actually made a significant difference.
It's hard to say. I mean, the head gasket might have started, you know, seeping a little bit of compression juice.
Like right here?
Yeah, 4,900 or so, because if you look at that curve, it starts converging back in towards the other one. So I'm gonna rest my laurels on that. And also, I did a little bit of research, and, you know, my bogey was the 383 Dart, because that engine goes in my 68 Dart, and in 68, the top engine option was the 383 with 300 horsepower only.
Only 300?
And 280 in the 67 380 Dart. 383 Dart, yeah.
Because they had that crimped down exhaust manifold on the left side.
That's exactly what it was. But
so your bogey was not the 335 Roadrunner motor.
I think
it was the 300 horse Dart engine, and you got that by 328. So in the end, a broken engine, but an easy repair, 328 horsepower, squeaking by Dulcich's bogus standards for his goal, which is kind of what we do every single time on Engine Masters. Have you ever built a Slant 6?
I'm not sure if you could call it building it. I took the pistons out and ridge reamed it.
Oh, yeah.
Because I couldn't get the pistons out. And I wasn't all that familiar with ridge reamers at that point. I was still in high school, so it might have been just a little overboard on the top quarter inch, maybe the 100,000s. I kept it high enough where the rings didn't pass it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was bigger. I just call it port relieving the cylinder walls.
Yeah, your crevice volume was...
The guy I worked for at the Conoco gas station at the time was not impressed at all.